Japanese immigrants began their journey to the United States in search of peace and prosperity, leaving an unstable homeland for a life of hard work and a chance to provide a better future for their children. By 1920, women accounted for nearly 50% of Japanese in Hawaii and 35% in the Golden State, whereas Chinese only occupied for 5%. Why was there a big proportion of Japanese women than Chinese? The first main reason is a powerful regulation by the central government. Unlike the Chinese Exclusion Act, 1907 Gentleman Agreement was negotiated by the Japan military. In this agreement, Japan could no longer issue passports to Japanese immigrants, and the U.S. would allow immigration for only the wives, children, and parents of current Japanese whom already reside in the U.S. The adoption of the 1907 Gentleman's Agreement spurred the arrival of picture bride marriage of convenience made at a distance through photographs. The second reason is the context of internal economic developments. While women in China were restricted to farm and home, Japanese women were increasingly entering the wage-earning workforce. Young women were also working in textile mills. These girls, most of them were aged between 12 and 20, and were usually housed in dormitories at the mills. Education became one of the most important requirements for women in Japan. The Meiji government required education for female children. Third, the influence of gender by Japanese point of views. Once a woman got married with a man, she has to belong to his parents and love his parents without condition. Therefore, most wives came to America to help their husband to work on sugarcane field, and most of them never came back to their homeland.
During the time of working for the planters, it was quite obvious to them that they weren't being treated as equals with the whites, as they were not given the same opportunities and equal pay as they did. Not only did the Japanese American feel like they were treated unfairly, but the women of workers in that plantation were being discriminated as well. As a result, the Japanese Americans started a strike in 1909, which made the planters very concerned. They caused riots and made demands just so they could be treated as equals with the whites. Even though the strike ended in a failure since they were forced back to work 4 months later, their demands were taken into consideration by their bosses. Later in the year 1920, the Filipinos started a strike of their very own soon after their forces have increased, and asked the Japanese to join them in their cause. They reluctantly accepted their offer, of course, but because of their strike, thousands of workers stopped working and it caused a lot of problems for the planters, which they decided to take action and planned a counterattack by bribing Pablo Manlapit, the leader of the Filipino Federation of Labor. And they started a horrible rumor about the Japanese Federation of Labor, saying that they want to turn the United States into their image. In their futile attempt to gain higher wages, the planters gained the complete victory when they enlisted the strikebreakers to force the strikers out of their homes. And as a result, a lot of people got sick and died. However, despite the recent win against the strikers, the planters increased wages by 50% discreetly.
Workers of different nationalities were usually housed in separate camps. Generally, the earlier camps were crowded, small, and unsanitary. The laborers had their own reasons to make their camps better. They were transforming their camps into ethnic communities. The Japanese would place bonsai plants on the step of their cottages. They created artistic gardens to add a reminder of their homeland. The 100 Japanese families were like one big family. Everybody knew each other and they were all friendly towards each other. On every plantation, the Japanese immigrants would have Buddhist temples and Japanese taught languages schools for their children. The camp became a site for their traditional celebrations. At first, laborers only spoke their native language, but after a while, workers with different nationalities would begin to acquire a common language. Over the years, plantation dialects developed a language called Pidgin English or Broken English. It enabled people from different countries to communicate with each other. Most of the immigrants had been farmers in Japan. To become a farmer in America was their dream. Initially, Japanese mainly worked in agriculture, railroads, construction, and canneries. Within 2 decades after their first arrival, thousands of them became farmers. To obtain land, the Japanese used 4 methods: contract, share, lease, and ownership. The contract system is when a farmer agreed to plant and harvest a crop for a set amount to be paid by a landowner when the crop was sold. The share system is when a farmer receives a certain percentage of the crop's profit. Under the lease arrangement, the Japanese farmers would rent the land and he could obtain capital through loans from brokers and shippers. At the end of the season, if he harvested a large amount of crops and received a good price for it, he would pay his rent and clear his debts. The eventual goal was to become a land-owning farmer. The planters did not want the children of immigrants to have opportunities. They wanted the second generation to also be laborers. Seeing their parents suffer from hard work, low wages, and discrimination, many of the second generation Japanese Americans refused to be tracked in plantation labor. They believed in education and thought it was the freedom from plantation. Young Japanese aspired to be something more than field laborers. The workday on the farms were long and demanding. Many Japanese immigrants believed that their success, especially in agriculture, would help them be accepted in American society.
Just as others that have come before them, a constant problem the Japanese faced was racism. However, that hatred was mainly focused on those born on American soil. It affected everything, from where to live, getting a job, who to marry, and just who to hang out with. Despite the fact that several American-born Japanese students had 1 or more degrees from very well-known and prestigious colleges, if they were of Japanese descent, well, better try somewhere else. When they did find work, however, it was usually food-related, either working on a farm, sometimes with friends and family. Other times it was working from a fruit stand. Those that did find work, however, were lucky, as when compared to others that weren't so lucky. Sometimes after coming home from having a nice dinner with some friends and family, they would find their house was pretty much in ruins. Glass shattered all over the place, painted messages left on their homes saying for them to go back to their country, and sometimes, unfortunately, that hatred would get pretty damn physical. But just like the samurai of Japan, they did not give up, and they made every opportunity count to the point that they could open up their own restaurants or other businesses just to not only help out other fellow Japanese Americans, but also to show that they were not just farmers, but something more.